Adams.
Here.
Adamley.
Here.
Adamowski. Adamson.
Here.
Adler.
Here.
Anderson. Anderson.
Here.
Bueller. 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 Bueller.
He's sick. My best friend's sister's boyfriend's brother's girlfriend heard from this guy who knows this kid is going with the girl who saw Ferris pass out at 31 Flavors last night. I guess it's pretty serious.
Thank you, Simone.
No problem whatsoever.
Three Films and a Podcast has no claim of ownership on any film footage used in this episode. All film footage is owned in its entirety by the copyright holders and is used solely with the intent of film criticism, commentary, and education under fair use law. And just like every car in Too Fast, Too Furious, this podcast contains spoilers. Enjoy.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Three Films and a Podcast, the show where three friends challenge each other to broaden their cinematic horizons through a series of themed rounds. My name is Tyler Beck. I'm coming to you from Portland, Oregon, and I'm joined, as always, by my friend Ben Lawhorn in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Hello.
And my arch nemesis, Matt Weiler in Pleasant Grove, Utah.
Hello.
That's not true. He's far from my nemesis. I love Matt dearly. But for whatever reason, I gave Ben the friend intro, and I couldn't just, we gotta have conflict. We never have conflict on here. So
Gotta have some.
For this episode, Matt will be my nemesis.
Started off with one. Yep. Oh, great. Yeah.
For those of you that are new to the show, first of all, welcome to the club. We're super glad you're here. What began as a movie exploration club in a group chat between the three of us has sort of evolved into a little community where we come on here and we chat about the movies that we're watching and movies that we love and maybe don't love. Who knows? Yeah, again, we're just happy you're here. And with that in mind, I want to introduce everyone to Ethan Simmie from 15 Minutes of Marvel.
Hey, what's up? How's it going, fam?
What's up?
Your answer to that was you're doing well. I personally am doing well. And yeah, Ethan, this is your second time joining us, correct?
Yeah, second time. I am privileged. Honestly, it took a long time to get me back, so I'm a little worried. I don't know if this is like a second test or what, but I'm happy to be back.
No, not at all. We just, we wanted to, what's the term? We're not playing hard to get, but,
you're playing hard to get.
A less is more type thing, you know?
Mm.
The listeners are clamoring for more Ethan, but we're making them wait. So anyways,
I
here
like
you
that.
are.
I like
Supply and demand.
Yeah. Capitalism. It's beautiful. As I mentioned, you run an awesome podcast, one of my personal favorites, 15 Minutes of Marvel. You actually run it from here in Portland, which is just sort of a coincidence. And yeah, you want to take a minute to talk about that and plug your stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like you said, 15 Minutes of Marvel every Tuesday and Friday, new episodes at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. Yeah, 15 minutes. I just talk about Marvel. It's literally the best 15 minutes of my week. It's pretty dynamite. And with Loki starting up in like 2 days, and by the time the show comes out, I'm sure Loki is out. New episodes every Wednesday and Friday, because for glorious purpose with Loki. So yeah, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, everywhere. So be sure to subscribe. And I would say become a patron so I can buy some cool Marvel stuff to put in my recording studio. That'd be great.
That would be great. Yes, please do go follow, listen, like, and subscribe to both our show and Ethan's. I assume you've already done that for us since you're here, but take a minute and check out our boy Ethan.
We've talked about it a little bit. I just want to say that I still think it's insane that we're in June and we still have 4 Marvel movies coming out this year.
Yeah.
Like besides Loki, we still have 4 movies from the MCU. It's crazy to me that we're getting insane. 4 movies in 6 months. I cannot wait. Hopefully this last 6 months will make up for whatever we missed out on last year. I'm excited.
Yeah, not to turn this into a Marvel pod, which could easily happen. I have been doing a soft rewatch of the MCU. I've skipped Iron Man 2 and Iron Man 3, which Ethan might have some thoughts about.
No, that's fine.
Interesting
I-
choice. Just kidding.
For whatever reason, I was just like, I don't need to see those again.
Not
I
today.
don't know why. And I'm super, super, super excited for Loki. Part of the reason I wanted to do this was to catch up on all the Thor stuff. He's my personal favorite, and get caught up on Loki. And
Did you watch Dark World?
I literally just watched it. Yeah.
Nice.
The other
That's
day.
awesome.
And
So you watch
this,
Dark World, but you won't watch Iron Man 2. This is interesting.
well, I have
but in
spent-
terms of Loki, I
prepping
give
for
you
Loki.
that. Prepping for Loki.
and I just have a very unabashed love for Thor. And I'll tell you what, guys, I could derail this conversation here. We could go from the planned conversation to Thor Dark World, because gets a bad rap. Let's just say that. Ethan,
Does indeed.
if you
Yeah.
want to talk about it, I'll come on your pod, Ethan.
Oh, yeah.
But
You're
I'm a
welcome
fan.
anytime.
I'm a
Anytime.
fan. But to get back to the matter at hand, what we're actually going to talk about here is a movie by our boy Steven Spielberg, friend of the pod, longtime listener and subscriber. Ready Player One. Ethan, I think if I remember right, you were already a fan of this movie. You had seen it. You jumped at the opportunity to talk about this movie. So why don't you go ahead and give us a pretty brief rundown and a synopsis to get us started, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll just give you what's on the IMDb page so we can start with a clean slate.
Cool.
It says, when the creator of a virtual reality called the OASIS dies, he makes a posthumous challenge to all OASIS users to find his Easter egg, which will give the finder his fortune and color of his world, or control of his world. Sorry. So it's literally exactly that. Caught in a video game world trying to find Easter eggs. It is an awesome movie. I will just like lay where I stand on that. And when I was on your show last time, we linked up after, and you guys hooked me up with your schedule, and I was like, yo, I want to come on and talk about Ready Player One. Like, this movie's so much fun. So yeah, it's a video game movie stuck in a video game. It's freaking awesome.
Love it. Well, let's just get right into the next topic then. I like to ask everyone sort of what their experiences with the movie are. Like, sometimes we'll talk about some old movies that maybe you might have had experiences with before seeing it, or, that sort of thing. So tell us a little bit about your personal experience with this movie, and like when it first landed on your radar, that sort of thing. Oh, and expand on your overall thoughts while you're at it.
Yeah, for sure. So movie came out in 2018, March of 2018. So I do remember seeing this in the theater. Now this movie, like, I'm not crazy on video games. I just don't have like all the free time, right, to like really dive into the world of video games. But I like video games in general, right? And like that, like pop culture, who doesn't, like,
right.
All of these things. And so and my wife knows this very well about me, and during my rewatch this past weekend, over the 3 days it took me to rewatch this movie in between real life, I turned to her and I looked at her and I was like, I love movies about being in an alternate reality. And she goes, I know you do. And I was like, this movie is dynamite. I never read the book, so I had no expectations. I was not attached to anything. I didn't even know it was a book until I was like, oh, what is this movie? Right.
Yeah.
And like going to see it in the theater. I remember seeing it in the theater and being like just super, super jazzed about it, being like, this was awesome. This was just really, really fun. Had no clue that Spielberg was the director. Really,
we'll talk
honestly,
about
like
that.
wasn't really like into movies. This was like before I got really into like movies
nice.
are amazing kind of a thing. So this was really just a watch for me of like, that looks cool, and I guess I'll go see it. Yeah. So I love it. I had a blast with it, and honestly, I think it's a really, really, really fun movie.
Did your opinion of it or your thoughts about the movie change upon rewatch at all?
No. If anything, they grew. Like,
oh, nice.
I can definitely see myself watching this like once a year, being like, wow, I guess I forgot how cool this movie is. Like, yes, and we're gonna get into it. Like, yeah, it's predictable. Like that's how the trope and like the storyline of the movie goes. But it's just really fun. And like, yeah, it took me 3 nights because of life and like whatever else. And so that's how I had to split it up. But I know the first night I got probably about an hour into it, and I thought to myself, like, that seemed like 20 minutes to me. Like I was just so engrossed in what was happening on screen. And my number one thought, like coming away from my rewatch, was nobody talks about this movie. How are we not talking about this movie? Is only made 3 years ago, so like it's not that old. And this like the visuals are incredible. They're insane to me. It's fantastic.
Yeah, that's a good point. I have some thoughts about why it might not be talked about so much, but like you said, we'll get into that. Matt, what about you? What was your personal experience and your overall thoughts?
So I had read the book years ago.
Nerd!
The book is a ton of fun. It's one of the most fun.
That seems, not to cut you off immediately, but you are my nemesis here. So I just wonder.
Thanks for your thought.
Thanks
Ben,
for
what do you
joining
think?
us. I'm watching it. I was like, how? I mean, your imagination is limitless and blah blah blah. But like, I just wondered like how a movie like this would translate to the page. So it's just, it's interesting to me that this started as a pretty beloved book and went to this movie. But yeah. No, I mean, sorry, you haven't read the book? No.
Okay. So I mean, they in the book, it does a pretty good job of, it doesn't try to over explain what virtual reality is like. It really, it assumes that you have a basic understanding of what virtual reality is. And it gets way more into, basically in a short period of time, they basically say virtual reality has gotten to a point where it's basically reality. Right. So you put on your headset and it's reality now. So yeah. And there's different like equipment that makes it a better, more realistic experience. And that's about as much time as they spend, explaining that. And so from that point on, it's almost as good as a fantasy novel because everything that they can do and all that within the OASIS. So I had read the book years ago. It was a ton of fun. The book is chock full of 80s references. And that's really the source of everything in the book. The whole Willy Wonka treasure story is really just interlaid with just nonstop 80s references, which makes it a ton of fun because you're reading it and like you remember this, you remember that, you don't remember that, so you look it up. And so it's just like it's a ton of fun. And it references a ton of movies. Like it's basically, I mean, here we are, we're a pop culture podcast, and this is like, it's the pop culture person's fantasy dream.
Sure.
It's their weird science movie come to life.
Yeah.
There you go.
Exactly. And so, it's just a ton of fun. I was greatly anticipating this movie. I knew that they were going to have to take some liberties because the type of references it was making can only appeal to a certain demographic. And so I knew there was going to be a wider appeal. And I actually really liked the direction that they took. My wife read the book immediately before seeing it and hated the movie on the first viewing.
Oh, this classic conversation.
Shoot.
Yeah. I mean, totally bummed out about things that she didn't get to see. But upon, repeated viewings, appreciating it for what it is, embracing the changes, she's really liked it. I thought Ty Sheridan and Olivia Cooke were just rock solid casting. I mean, the whole cast is great. But
shouts Ben Mendelsohn for me. I think he might have been my favorite.
Love Ben Mendelsohn.
Mention him. He's so good.
Also, Lena, how do you say it? Lena Waithe. Yeah, she's great. I love her a lot. But anyways, that's my second interruption in your first.
No, that darn you, Tyler.
Shoot.
No, but I mean that basically summarizes my thoughts. I mean, I obviously recognize that it's very different from the source material. I didn't look at that as a negative thing at all.
Yeah.
I had this book recommended to me from your arch nemesis, actually. Matt was the one that told me to read it, and I'm glad he did because I loved it. It's a super fun read. It's not deep or anything like that. And given our conversation on Close Encounters, that just makes sense why Spielberg was the one that did it. He's He knows how to do spectacle. He knows how to do all that stuff. And the movie itself doesn't necessarily need to have like a huge, deep message or anything like that. Like, it's a lot of surface stuff. It's a lot of fun. You know what's happening, whatever. So yeah, I don't know. I loved the book. Then yeah, I saw the movie in theaters and I enjoyed it. Like we kind of hit on it already, and I'm sure we will again. It's a big conversation to have with Spielberg being the one that took over, because there obviously are quite a few changes. He took a lot of liberties with his own stuff, which is like an interesting conversation, I think, for us to have. But yeah, some of the challenges are different. I think the first one in the book was about the movie War Games, like it was something like that.
Yeah,
like,
my coworker was mentioning that
doesn't
today.
get referenced here. Yeah, which is like, I get it. You know what I mean? Like, maybe it's not something that people are going to pick up on, and a huge race is a lot more fun to show, than someone like trying to recreate the War Games battle. So I totally get why some of those liberties were taken. But yeah, I mean, I loved it in theaters. It's that race scene itself, I think, is like made for the theaters. Like, it was so cool. I think I hadn't watched this since watching a lot of the MCU stuff. So I was like getting some weird, like, Civil War airport / end of Endgame fight stuff, when the end is happening here. It's like, oh yeah, this is where I've seen this. Like, it was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Like, how do you keep track of this stuff? Like, it's kind of crazy, just big battle scenes. But yeah, I know I enjoy this movie. It is a lot of fun. It's like it's a fun watch if you're looking for something kind of lighthearted, I guess.
Yeah.
I think this is it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, let's just get right into the Spielberg conversation and kind of what you were talking about. Because really my only experience with it was I watched it yesterday. I'd heard about it. I thought it was Ender's Game. I was expecting to see Harrison Ford the whole time watching it. And then I realized eventually, I'm like, oh, that's a different sort of virtual reality-ish fantasy movie. I haven't seen Ender's Game. I don't know anything about it either, based on a book. So we are in the third installment of our directors. It wasn't like an official director's deep dive, but we've done 3 rounds now with famous directors, this being the third. We've done Kubrick, we've done Hitchcock, and now this is our second movie on Spielberg. And so, these guys all sort of have their own specific thumbprint and their own specific trademark and style. But, this is sort of a maybe an exception to that rule for Spielberg specifically. So I'm just wondering, like, if there was any like Spielbergisms that you guys picked up on or you were watching out for. And like Ethan, you didn't know this was a Spielberg. So like, if you guys, Ben and Matt, didn't know it was a Spielberg, would you have been able to guess? Yeah, I'm curious. We'll start with Ethan there. You've already sort of answered this, but
yeah. I mean, look, I guess in terms of directors and another podcast that I'm a part of, although it's ending, is a Final Take Pod. We check out a director every single month. So the first episode of the month, we do a director of the month. And truthfully, like, I would not consider myself a student of film. So like,
sure,
I'm not going to come in here and be like, yeah, this, like, A, B, and C, that's Spielberg, like, lock it up. That's so easy to tell. You all are, talking Spielberg, so you would know more than I would, but like, I just don't know that kind of stuff. Like, it's just not a natural thing for me to know. And so, like I said, like, I didn't know this was Spielberg, and I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. Like, that could be taken either way.
Yeah.
In terms of like, oh yeah, anybody could have done it, but one of the greats did it, or like, oh, it was done so well that like it didn't like it didn't jump out to you like, wow, this had to be done by someone that caliber.
Right.
And looking at Steven Spielberg's IMDb, I was unaware that he did Minority Report.
Okay.
This is news to me. Like, an absolute heater of a movie. And I know you guys are going through it. Spielberg is a GOAT when it comes to this stuff, but I'm just every single time I think like, wow, Spielberg did that and that and that. Like, I'm flabbergasted. And it's so interesting to me. This is his most recent film. this is like the last movie that he can like tie his name to, right? We've got West Side Story coming out later this year. Was supposed to come out last year, right? But I think that's super interesting, and maybe you guys can fill me in. Like, is this up Spielberg's alley? Like, is this something like he I know with pop culture, with E.T., Indiana Jones, Jurassic Park, like all these things are a big pop culture reference. So maybe that's why Spielberg took it on. I don't know. I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's definitely an interesting conversation that, I wanted to get into with him taking over. It's just that, like you said, all three of those things, Jurassic Park, E.T., like all that kind of stuff is so clearly Spielberg. I think in watching this movie, I mean, it's hard to play the hypothetical of like, what I know, but there are so many things where it's just like, yeah, he's such like a fan of movies, like up there with like Scorsese and stuff like that, where it's just, he respects the craft. So like as meticulous as everything was done in The Shining, like that's all I feel like from Spielberg's brain. Like that looked like just an exact reproduction of like the whole Shining scene. I was like, yeah, that's someone who really appreciates the craft and knows how it needs to be done. I think he is also really good at spectacle, like the big fight scenes. He's great at establishing locations. The thing I found interesting about this movie though, and watching the behind the scenes stuff, is that like they were just doing this all essentially in mocap suits on like a big, studio lot for the most part. And he had like this hand set that he could like control the virtual reality camera with to figure out what shots he wanted. And it was so crazy watching that. Cause like you say, like this is the most recent movie he's directed. It's like, this is crazy. Like the amount of technology that this guy is using, who got his big break from like a robot shark not working. Like the leap he made from technology to technology, like it's insane.
So wait, he was
like,
directing this?
We were watching this movie because a fucking shark wouldn't work. He had like, they gave him this handheld set. He had like the goggles on like the OASIS. What? And it was crazy. Like he had the handheld like joysticks, and in the VR, he had a monitor that he could like get the shot that he wanted. So it was like VR inside the VR. It's nuts to watch it. It's just like, it's like Inception, basically. It's like, holy shit. Like, wait, how are you doing this? Like, I mean, the dude's like in his 70s or something. Like, I don't know if I could handle that stuff. But like, I can't imagine.
My grandpa can't even turn on his iPod.
How this all works. It was like, it was nuts, but it was so cool because he was looking at the monitor in the VR and he's like, cool, I want to be closer to them, but I want to have a wider shot. And he could see that in the monitor of what the exact camera angle was going to be.
Wow.
Because he had ILM working on this and another company called like Digital Domain. So I don't know. The behind the scenes is totally worth the watch. Like, I think it's almost more interesting than the movie. Like it's totally different, but just like, if you like to know how things are done, it's a great watch. It's really, really interesting. But yeah, it was Spielberg. Like you get the spectacle, you get like everything's going to be okay. I don't think you're ever really worried that Ben Mendelsohn is going to win. But yeah, again, shout out Ben Mendelsohn. He is so awesome. Yeah, and we're going to talk about him in the next round. Unsung Gems. He'll be in Animal Kingdom.
Oh,
so
nice.
Yeah, I don't know. I think you could tell it's a Spielberg movie, but I think it's just because of how much he loves the craft, and whoever made this movie had to love what was in there. My only, I don't know, qualm, whatever with it, and I know we talk about it, is just like, he took so much of himself out. This is different than like the author and the director doing different versions like The Shining or whatever. It's just like, he specifically just took himself out because he just kind of felt weird about like having his own references in there. Like, I think we only got like the T-Rex.
Yeah.
And I think something else, I don't remember what it was. Like some of the stuff from Amblin Entertainment was in there, obviously like Back to the Future and stuff, but his directed movies, he just like took all of his references out. And like, I'm curious what that movie is like if he keeps himself in or if someone else directs it, but I don't know who else could handle it. Like, I think he did a great job. I loved it.
Yeah. No, I think it is interesting. And I haven't looked into like the reasons why Spielberg left his work out of this movie. But it's just funny how like it seemed like he did it to not seem pretentious, and then by doing so almost made it way more pretentious.
Right.
Yeah.
Why he makes sense to me for this movie is he's a blockbuster guy, and there's a ton of blockbuster guys out there, and he's the best guy. He's still the best guy for the blockbuster job. And it's because of his, as Ben mentioned, his reverence for the craft, for filmmaking, for storytelling. it's a reverence that a lot of these blockbuster guys now just don't have. Even ones with that make movies that I like, they just don't have the same storytelling chops that Spielberg has. And so when I saw that he was on for this movie, I was like way stoked. And number two, I thought that it was kind of perfect because it's kind of its own Easter egg, just because of how many times he's referenced in the books. And Ernest Cline was involved in this project, so it seems very intentional that it worked out the way that it did. But some other things for something that we like doing for people listening is we do try to highlight the things that make something a Spielberg movie or make something a Hitchcock or a Kubrick, for those that maybe don't, pay attention to those things. And I will say Spielberg, of Kubrick and Hitchcock, I would say that outside of just like overall spectacle, he probably has the least identifiable fingerprint of the three. I feel like you have a lot of people who make Spielberg-esque movies. Sure. And so, I mean, he may have his recipe and you find out it's a Spielberg. You're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But like, there's like 10 other directors making movies that, could have been a Spielberg movie.
Shout out J.J. Abrams.
I was just going to say,
like and subscribe.
If I were to pick another director to give this movie a shot, I'd probably pick J.J. Abrams.
For sure.
J.J. is copying and pasting from Steven Spielberg's report.
For sure.
But I think what makes Spielberg movies are you can expect. I mean, the guy, like Ben said, spectacle, I think is the key word here. Even in his biopics, he goes above and beyond. It just, it may not be a T-Rex smashing a car, but like he's doing Lincoln and it's like the most immersive period piece of that time. And you expect adventure, expect some form of optimism in some of the bleakest scenarios, expect visual, like really great visual storytelling. And expect, and this is one of my favorite things that I've noticed in most of his movies, his lived in spaces are just like so over the top. Like the houses that are lived in are just like pouring with like junk and and stuff. And I mean, and product placement. You can usually anticipate a little bit of product placement in his movies.
The man's got bills to pay.
That's right.
You got to secure the bag somehow. Can I ask a question real quick in terms of box office? Like, just like Spielberg being the box office guy, right? Like the big spectacle guy. So it looks like this movie pulled in 583 million, which is his sixth biggest box office pull. Which is ahead of Saving Private Ryan, ahead of Jaws, right? Like ahead of Raiders, these kinds of things, with Jurassic Park obviously being the one like that got him over $1 billion. So I think it's pretty impressive that he can go on and make a movie like this, and it could be in the mix with a list of movies from the 70s and 80s. And sure, like it didn't make probably as much as it could have, but it's still on his list of like biggest grossing films of all time for Steven Spielberg. Like that's going to be forever an imprint for Spielberg. I think that's a pretty cool thing to have his name tied to a film like this. Like Ben, you were saying, the guy's been making movies for 45 years and he 100% like could have gone the Scorsese route and been like, nah, this
isn't
like,
film anymore.
Right. This doesn't count as film. Like this is technology. It's not film. And he could have went that route, but he didn't. And like the dude's still crushing it at the box office. Very impressive.
Yeah. I mean, probably a lot to do with that success at the box office. I mean, he's probably writing his name quite a bit. You know what I mean? Like, I am curious if like this book had a following, the story had a following previous to its release as a movie. And so I'm curious if J.J. Abrams directed it, or if some other lesser known director had directed it, if it would have still pulled that amount at the box office. I mean, obviously there's no way we would know. But it's interesting to think about, because honestly, like a lot like you, Ethan, I couldn't have told you this was a Spielberg movie on watching it. Even knowing it was a Spielberg movie, I probably wouldn't have picked it. I probably would have guessed it was some up and coming director or something. But now with that being said, I'm realizing as we've been talking, Like when I personally think of a Spielberg movie, I think of things more like Jurassic Park or E.T. or things with like that sort of like heart and warmth. You know what I mean? Like you don't necessarily think of Jurassic Park as like a warm movie with people being eaten by T-Rex or whatever. But, you know, there is sort of a sense of like family and hope and that sort of thing. And like that's all over E.T. That's, you know, that's those are the movies that I think of when I think of Spielberg. I don't necessarily think of, you know, a movie that you mentioned, Minority Report or Munich or
Schindler's List.
Schindler's List or Saving Private Ryan. Like for whatever reason, I don't think of those movies when I think of Spielberg, although I know he directed them. I think of the more like hopeful, warm movies, maybe just because those are the ones I grew up with. So, you know, maybe it's an unfair criticism because as I'm talking, I'm realizing like if I watched Minority Report, not knowing it was a Steven Spielberg, I'm not sure I would have known. You know what I mean? But like a movie like Catch Me If You Can, it does sort of have that like warmth and heart to it, even though it's a movie about a con man. But you know, there's hope in it, and he in the end, I know it's a true story, but he ends up kind of winning in the end. You know, even though he's technically a bad guy. So it's an interesting conversation.
Like, we kind of talked about it with Close Encounters too, that he just always there's like this underlying layer of optimism in every single one of his movies, you know? So even in like Saving Private Ryan, you just like, they're gonna find him. It's going to be okay. You know what I mean? Or even strangely enough, like in Schindler's List, like he will turn his feelings around. Like he's going to see what's going on, like all that kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, there's always some weird level of optimism with him. Which makes sense in E.T. and Hook and all that stuff, you know. But yeah, when you think about Minority Report, you know, like, I don't know, it's a cool sci-fi, like epic movie. But if you sit back and think about it, it's like, yeah, you're with Tom Cruise, like you're rooting for him. You want, you know, he's being framed, but he's, you know, I don't know, you're optimistic about how it's going to turn out.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a good point. I mean, I think if anything, it sounds like what we're saying is the only through line that we can find is that optimism and that, like, you know, with like when we watch The Shining, which we're going to talk about because it's featured prominently in this movie, like you don't have a sense of hope for that family. And that's something that's very Kubrick, you know what I mean? Like there's a sense of dread when you watch his stuff. And with Hitchcock, there's a sense of uncertainty and there's a sense of like, suspense and paranoia. Whereas with Spielberg, it's like, you know, you generally feel good about how this movie's going to end, even though for the most part, a movie ends in a good way. You know what I mean? Like that's sort of the formula, right? Like with the exception of a movie like Seven.
Oh, what's in the box? What's in the fucking box?
There's obviously others out there. Typically the movie ends in a way that's going to make you at least not mad. So, but yeah, with Spielberg, I think to me that would be the through line there is just the optimism and the heart to the films.
Can I say something real quick? So I think I was gonna say that the other I'm out. All right, done. I was gonna say that the other through line that I can find is if it has that underlying optimism or if it's Indiana Jones, but Indy 5, we break the chain, so it's no good. Can't be done.
Well, I haven't seen it.
Oh, yeah. Mangold's directing it.
Yeah. So Mangold's directing it, and we'll get like Mads Mikkelsen and like the new, like all kinds of exciting things. I guess the script is really good, but like,
nice.
That could have been the other through line. Like, okay, there's two ways to know it's a Spielberg movie. If it's got optimism or if it's Indiana Jones.
I thought you were talking about Crystal Skull at first. I'm like, I haven't seen it, even though we're talking about a movie that hasn't.
Oh no, the new,
come out yet.
new one. Like it's not even, crazy.
Gotcha.
Too bad.
And also, Matt makes a good point. Like the dude can make a blockbuster, right? Like he's good at spectacle, and he's good at keeping spectacle, keeping it within the bounds of what you would like can accept as a viewer. You know what I mean? It doesn't seem like spectacle for the sake of spectacle, which is impressive considering this movie is all about the spectacle, but somehow it doesn't even seem like it's about the spectacle. And he's really good at balancing that. So I'd say that's another Spielberg-ism that I could pin on this one. So let's talk about pop culture for a minute. Pop culture is like essentially what this movie's about. And in my opinion, the story in this movie, it's certainly fun. And I did like the movie, but like we've talked about, it's pretty vanilla, right? It's pretty predictable. You can pretty much guess what's going to happen from moment to moment. And as I was watching it, I was having fun and I was really liking it. But I got to thinking, like, would I like this movie as much as I do if you stripped out all the pop culture references and all the tie-ins? Like if they created their own pop culture within the movie, or if somehow they had a different mechanism, like I'm not so sure if I would have liked it as much. So I want to talk about that a little bit. And also I'm curious what your guys' favorite pop culture tie-ins were in the movie. And if there was any that weren't in the movie that you wish would have been. And I have an idea where Ethan might go with this, but let's start with you first.
No, tell me where I'm going to go. I want to know if you're going to get it.
Like anyone that follows you on Twitter knows you're always on brand. And so
always.
I'm just assuming with your brand where you might go with this. And I'm not going to spoil it because I want to know.
Okay. Well, yeah, always on brand. RIP Uncut Gems for not winning any awards. I gotta, I have to throw that in there while we're here. Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting question that I don't think is really fair. I don't think it's really fair because this.
I knew you would say that.
This can't exist. This doesn't exist without pop culture,
sure.
Right? Like that. Right. That's the point. Is it a vehicle for pop culture references? Probably. Like, I mean, right? Like every single scene that you can think of, any change of scenery, any change of pace, any like clear cut, like we're moving to the next act, it's always layered with, okay, we've got more, like we've got a pop culture song. We've got pop culture references right off the bat. So we know we still stand in this world of pop culture. And we don't ever stray out of that. I think it's fantastic. I think it's really, really fun to do that. But yeah, I just don't think this movie like nearly has the reach or the depth or like the grasp of an audience without any of this pop culture. Like I wrote down in my notes, the first thing I have written down in my notes, any movie that starts with Van Halen, automatically 5 stars. Like that's
so you just right proved my point.
Right out of the gate, you're throwing down Van Halen Jump. Like it's the most predictable pop culture move you could make from the 80s.
Yeah.
And you still win. Like it's unlosable when you're throwing in this kind of pop culture. And he's jumping down the stacks. Like that's just sublime Spielberg making.
Yeah.
So, I do think it's awesome. There's I don't know if you guys or your listeners know New Rock Stars. They break down all kinds of stuff on YouTube. He's got a video out there of all the Easter eggs in this movie. He found like 300 Easter eggs, and it's a 40-minute long video.
That's
I
great.
sat down, I watched it. I did the homework for this show, and it's bananas. But
someone's got to do it.
Yeah, it had to be me. A couple of the interesting ones for me is the Orb of Ossivox. When they open the box is the same box that Gizmo comes in from Gremlins.
Oh, nice.
I was like, that's clutch. Like I had no idea. Like nobody's gonna see that. And then the other one that I like the most, and these are just some honorable mentions, and then I have my top tier. But another one that I like the most, when Wade or like Parzival and Daito are tricking Sorrento into thinking he's in real life, but he's actually in the Oasis. Hey, that scene is just like, that's a fantastic scene. Obviously Inception, very like Inception vibes of like, hold up, you're in a dream, like we've got guns to your head situation. But if you look closely at their eyes, there's this nice like orange tint, a little like Blade Runner in there of like, oh, you can tell like they're not real, or like they're not actually here.
Yeah.
So I noticed, I was wondering how our boy Mendelsohn didn't notice that in the moment. And I guess when you have a gun to your head, you don't necessarily pay attention to the color of someone's eyeballs. But I did wonder, like, I was like, I wonder why he's not noticing that. But it's definitely, like you said, I mean, it's part of the predictability of like, he's just not going to catch on.
I think
this is
best,
a dude who has his password like post-it notes on his chair.
Bossman
I don't think you
69.
can, like
This is
call him out
password.
too bad on not noticing someone's eyes.
Fair.
you
That's a
can't,
fair
you can't
point.
expect him to be the brains. He can't even talk pop culture. He's got to have people do it for him. So
Right.
I think the top pop
Which
culture
in
reference,
itself is a pop culture reference. Shout out Roxanne.
yeah.
Mhm.
For me, I found myself saying it every single time I saw it on screen. The Zemeckis cube
Yeah.
is awesome.
It's rad.
It's
Yeah.
so cool. And each time when he buys it, and when Parzival buys it, and when he uses it, I like literally out loud, I was like, I told my wife, I was like, it's a Zemeckis cube for Robert Zemeckis, who made Back to the Future, and it turns back time. Like, this is amazing. This is like in a Rubik's cube. It like, I don't know if I could think of a more unique 80s pop culture mashup like reference than a Zemeckis cube. Like that,
Right.
that is just so cool to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good
Super
stuff.
rad. So that was my long answer to say no, it's an unfair question.
Fair. That's fair.
Yeah, I think the Zemeckis cube was super awesome. It's been a while since I read the book, so I don't remember how much of like references that were in the original material versus what Spielberg did, but I could totally see that being like a Spielberg thing. 'Cause I'm pretty sure Zemeckis was like one of the other people who helped start Amblin Entertainment, so like best buds for sure. I loved like all the Easter eggs. Like I like that just in general in movies. And this, like you said, it was just like there was an overload of Easter eggs. I thought they were super cool. I just liked, I don't know, just like silly stuff, like seeing the old original Batmobile, you know, like in the race, like that was kind of rad. My favorite one that's like, it's not really like an Easter egg, like you don't notice it, but the Iron Giant like putting a thumbs up as it goes down, you know, into the lava or whatever, just like Terminator's like, oh, that was a really cool, like perfect time to do that. That was awesome. I do want to say though, it was funny in watching the behind the scenes thing that Ernest Cline like was on set. I mean, at least part of the time, because they show this clip where Ernest Cline is standing next to Spielberg, who's like looking at his monitor and trying to figure out what to do. And he's like, oh, do you know, sir, they're playing Turbo. Do you know why I did that one? He's like, no, why? He's like, you guys had a turbo machine at Amblin headquarters. And Spielberg's like, cool. You know, it's just like I was getting real like Chris Farley interview vibes, you know, like remember when you guys had turbo at Amblin? That was awesome.
So
You know,
funny.
it's
That's
like,
so
Spielberg's
funny.
like, I'd never stepped foot in that lobby, man. I don't
what
know.
you're talking about. Like, it made me think of like those cons where people pay, you know, like $50 to get a picture with someone. I was like, oh, this has got to be a nightmare for Spielberg. Where like whenever this guy's on set, it's like, hey, do you know why I put that in the book? It was because of you. You know, it's like it's got to be.
Do you know what for clothes I'm wearing?
With this guy, like your stalker, basically. Like, remember when you directed ET? Like, yeah,
I'm wearing the
fuck, man,
outfit
I
that
do.
Elliot
Like,
wore when he said goodbye to ET.
yeah, exactly.
Do you want some Reese's Pieces?
Yeah, that's why I have him in a red hoodie because of ET. Remember that? Like, I was just seeing that one clip. Was like, oh, that must have just been a nightmare to be with this guy.
Do you know why I
you
put
have
a
the
basket
Easter
on the
egg
front
guy
of my
telling you
handlebars?
all the
Brutal.
Easter eggs.
Steve,
while
what
you're
are
trying to
you
make a movie.
eating tonight for dinner? Did you hear
It
what I
was
said
So
just
bad.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just thought that was hilarious seeing that. I was like,
That's incredible.
I've never felt bad for Spielberg before, other than that one moment. I was like, that must have sucked. That's probably why he said it was the third hardest movie he's ever made. Just having to deal with that guy every day. But
That one reason.
I don't know. Like I love all the pop culture references. I think Ethan hit it on the head. I mean, I think we probably all kind of feel the same, but it's just, it doesn't work the same if we aren't getting the references. That's why the book was so popular, because it's like, oh yeah, I've seen War Games. I remember, you know, the end of the movie when he has to do that, like, or whatever, any of the other references, like a lot of John Hughes stuff, which I'm a huge fan of, you know, so that stuff all hit me really hard reading the book. And I think, you know, even like in the fight scenes, you know, like when we see the 4 kids like doing stuff, then we cut to in the fight and they're the Ninja Turtles, or like the 6 guys running. And then we cut to the fight and it's like the 6 Master Chiefs running together. It's like, yeah, like the Halo dudes find each other, of course, you know, like that makes sense. But if it's some video game that's inside this world that we don't know, that does not connect with me at all. Like, honestly, my favorite part, we'll get to it later, but like not my favorite part, but something I loved was when they got the Chucky doll, you know, and it's like that works because we know Chucky.
Yeah.
But if it's like another, you know what I mean? If it's like Bucky or whatever, like it would be in that universe, it's like, it just doesn't hit the same, because you're just gonna be thinking like, why didn't they just use Chucky? Like that would be perfect. So I don't know. I think that totally makes the movie. I get your point, and I just don't think it connects with the audiences as well if we aren't connecting with all the Easter eggs. Because I think a lot of us, like all the new rock stars and stuff like that, I think so many of us want to know everything at once, like every single like Easter egg, like what was that, and this movie is just like made of that stuff. And I'm that person. Like I go to IMDb trivia the minute a movie's over because I just want to learn everything I can. And I just don't think that works that well in this movie if it's like a made up universe. So I don't know. I think he did a really good job. I still wish, I guess his only two references were Jurassic Park and the alien ship from War of Worlds, which was like a weird choice to make. Cause like those are the two movies of your own you put in there. Like,
I don't know why. I just feel like Spielberg loves War of the Worlds.
He does,
obviously he like made the movie.
It's got the code of
it just must be like his favorite thing. And he's just like, no, I'm going to give them War of the Worlds references.
People don't appreciate this movie enough.
Jaws can
one
go
for them,
fuck itself.
One for me. They can have a T-Rex. I'm getting my alien ship in there. So yeah, I thought that was like an interesting choice on his part to like put that in there. Like you have so many movies, like even just the cannonball like rolling down from Indiana Jones, like something else like would have made more sense. But I don't know. Like I'm glad with what we got. We already talked about it. I just don't know who else would have directed it in this way. Like he's a craft of spectacle and also has the respect of film. So I think it was really good. I like seeing all these pop culture references.
Just as this conversation's gone on, I'm realizing that I think like his style could kind of be described or metaphorically articulated just with the Indiana Jones ride at Disneyland. Because you get on the ride, you go through some thrills, some suspense, some things go south, you have the boulder chasing you. But at the end of the day, the ride ends, you come out of the dark, and everything ends up somewhat okay for the most part. And that's kind of how his movies go. So to some degree, I think all of his movies are maybe a little bit predictable. I wouldn't say this is any more vanilla, in my opinion, than several of his others. I think you kind of, if you know it's Spielberg, then you kind of know at the very beginning that whatever the quest is here, they're going to accomplish it.
Yeah.
But since you guys didn't read the books, I do have a question. So, the scene where they blow up the stacks, was that not shocking to you, or did you feel like they were just absolutely going to blow up the stacks? Because in the book, they say that they're going to blow up the stacks, but you're just like, in the back of your mind, you're like, oh, something's going to stop them from doing that. Like, that's very drastic. Yeah. But then the stacks go up in flames, and that's when the book gets real. That's when you're like, oh, shoot. Like, now it's on.
I think for me, when I saw them blow up the stacks, I was like, okay, we're going to get really, like, things are going to get really intense really fast. Because, like, that's a pretty early decision to just, like, gun after his house just like that. And, like, the fact that there's like not really any kind of like build up. Ben Mendelsohn is not like thinking about it. Like maybe we'll get back to it in 20 minutes. He's like, this is his address. I found it out. Go blow it up. Like right now. Like that was intense. And yeah, I was like, oh my God, like Wade Watts, this just kind of like escalated to another level.
I think for me personally, as far as blowing up the stacks is concerned, it didn't really bother me. I mean, I recognize the loss of the life there. And we do spend a little bit of time when he's, jumping down the stack in the beginning, sort of meeting his neighbors. But the fact that the movie takes place almost completely in virtual reality, and even the people that live in the real world seem to have, the virtual world seems to be more important. So it almost like it almost seemed like the reverse, right? It almost seemed like, oh, that death only happened in like the less important world. Even that, like we hadn't really learned the lesson.
That's
dark. Right. No, totally. And like as I'm saying it, I'm like, God, like reevaluate some things here. But like the virtual world in Ready Player One is more important than the real world, at least in the way that it's presented to us. So when I see the stacks blow up, it's not like, it just was like, it almost seemed like a decision that was easy to come to, A, because he's the villain, and B, because it's like, there seems to be less importance placed on the real world in this movie. So it didn't surprise me that that blew up, and it didn't bother me. I'm heartless. I'm cold. Matt's the true hero.
Yeah,
that's the twist in this pod. He's my nemesis, but it's because he's the hero and I'm the villain.
I think your point's valid though, because I think we do spend so much more time in the Oasis that you almost feel worse when someone like zeroes out and has to start all over, after they have all this stuff. Like, oh man, that sucks. I got to start over. But then we watch the stacks blow
Except
up.
his
It's
uncle.
like, all right, well, we haven't been here a ton of time,
Yeah.
But I do think as far as the Mendelsohn character, like it really switches it on then of like how serious he is. Cause to keep the 80s references going up until that point, to me, he kind of felt like the principal in like Breakfast Club, where he's like, he'll come like yell at you and stuff like that, but nothing's going to happen.
Don't mess with the bull, young man. You'll get the horns.
That's like if in Breakfast Club, he's like, cool, I have a bomb in your dad's car. I'm going to blow it up right now if you don't shut the fuck up. It's like, oh, that movie totally changes right then when the principal starts killing your family,
Right.
And that's kind of what this felt like for me. It was just like, yeah, you can talk shit to him, whatever, because he's not going to do anything. Like, but then all of a sudden it's like, oh, cool, I'm going to blow up the neighborhood that you live in. It's like, okay, so this guy really will do anything at all. So now we know what the stakes are. But I do agree that, having read the book, I look with Matt, like I think it hits a lot harder in the book, and I know we don't need to get into this, but the movie really, we spend so much time in the Oasis that it doesn't seem to have as much of an impact as it probably should.
Yeah,
I
think
I'm just now realizing.
Ben Mendelsohn.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Tyler.
Well, I'm just realizing how much I need to see a version of Ferris Bueller's Day Off where Rooney is an evil psychopath. Yeah. He kidnaps Bueller's mom or something.
Just shoots or he the dog. The house
imagine if he kidnapped Sloane or something.
Oh my God. Just actually killed Sloane's grandma. Like, oh yeah, you're going to pretend she's dead? I'm going to actually kill your grandma.
I think you mentioned Ben Mendelsohn, and look, I'm a big Ben Mendelsohn fan. I love him in all kinds of things. I think he's fantastic in Rogue One and whatnot. But for me, like, I think his character is written really, really well. And I just have to kind of get this off my chest real quick. His character is really well. When he blows up the stacks, we know he means business.
Yeah.
He obviously at the very final scene, like, he just is going to take a gun to Wade Watts. Like, he's just rolling in hot. And I get that. For me, and so I think he checks all the boxes of his character. For me, I just wish we would have had one moment or one brief, like 5 seconds, where Ben Mendelsohn just gets to freak out. Like, I feel like Ben Mendelsohn is at his best when he is like irate, when he is just like losing his shit because he's so frustrated. And it looked to me like in this movie, like he was right there. And I'm like, just shout it out, brother. Just like yell about it. It's okay. And he just like never hit that dial. So I was a little bummed out because I was like, this, like, give him a little more life than what he had to kind of like get him out of this shell of like, this corporate slug guy,
I just want to make one last point on the whole pop culture thing. And you guys sort of swayed me. I realized as I wrote the question out and sort of put my response into the page here, like, and I think we all agree that the movie isn't as fun without the pop culture references, which sort of seems like a cheap crutch. And maybe that's why I was so mad at it. I wasn't, I'm not mad at it, but I just thought, like, that's just cheap, like the story itself is pretty boring. So you just hung a bunch of pop culture references on it. But it seemed like the entire movie, the whole point of the movie is that that's the impetus for the Oasis. That's the impetus for the entire movie. And that's actually pretty clever. And I've come to appreciate it more listening to you guys. But like, what the Shining section in the movie was hands down far and away my favorite part of this movie. And I'm not totally sure that if the best part of a movie is being in someone else's movie, I'm not totally sure if that's a good thing or not. So like, while it is a clever device and it is a clever way to do something that could be considered cheap and easy, I'm just not totally sure if it was fully worked out or if it totally worked for me. But you guys did sway me more to the side of it being cheap
Well,
to be
as your
clever.
nemesis, I'm going to take
Hit
a
me.
hard
Hit me.
stance counter to that. I mean, that's like
The good guy's got to save the day.
that's like
here.
saying Endgame's weakest points were when they travel back in time and spend time in other movies. You know what I mean? It's like,
Whoa. That's hot.
because so look, the very source. This isn't a movie where they're like, okay, let's do this movie that's about this, but let's throw in pop culture references. The pop culture references are the fabric of this story. Like,
Right.
That's what the movie is. Like, they're choosing to go into pop culture very deliberately, not for fan service, but to push, some elements along. And I think more than anything, it's paying like homage to the directors and how meticulous things were. Like, Ben kind of highlighted it with Kubrick. Like, the scenes that were chosen for that were very deliberate. Like, the choices made to push the story along were very deliberate. They chose the Shining. They could have chosen, any movie. So the better question is why was it The Shining? What does that tell about the story? What type of unique things could they do in The Shining that they couldn't do in 2001: A Space Odyssey?
Yeah.
The Shining in particular is an interesting choice considering who I assume the demographic for this movie is. I actually wanted to ask you this, Ben, and Ethan, I think your kids might be a little too young for it, but like the people that this movie was and this book was written for, of course, I guess the book didn't use The Shining, but like, are we just assuming that like 13 to 15-year-old kids have seen The Shining? Right? Like,
yeah. I mean, that's one thing sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just an interesting choice that I didn't really think about until just now. And I am curious, Matt, what your kids think of this movie. I didn't see a Party Tom review that I could look at.
Oh
but
man, I think he has one though.
I'm sure he does. I just didn't see it.
Tommy loves this movie. He obviously, I mean, to him, it's as basic as they go into a video game.
Sure.
And he just loves every second of that. I think he'll enjoy it more when he gets to see some of these other movies.
Yeah.
But yeah, he loves the movie. A lot of things probably went over his head. There's still things that probably went over my head, honestly, that like I didn't get. And so that's what makes this movie rewatchable. That's what makes the book like another, like a good book to reread. I haven't reread it. But the other thing about that I wanted to touch on was like this type of story is like super popular. It's the Willy Wonka story.
Right.
It's I mean, they're really on the nose about the symbolism with Parsifal. It's like, it's the Holy Grail story. Harry Potter 4 kind of does this same story with the Triwizard Tournament. So like people like this story. And so it's interesting that Ernest Cline told this story using pop culture as like his thing with the story. And then he just like quadruples down on Easter eggs, like multi-level Easter egg. I don't know if you knew this or if you read anything about the book, but the Ready Player One book itself is chock full of Easter eggs for readers to solve. And he gave away a DeLorean to the person who solved it.
Oh, wow.
What?
That's
rad.
go.
So
that's sick.
For people who read the book and picked up on the Easter eggs in the book, they won a DeLorean. So the guy
pays to know your pop culture, kids.
Yeah, that's the message.
Right.
I think just going to the Shining thing real quick. I think I was almost more impressed with how flawless it looked, especially for us having just watched The Shining.
Right.
Because it just felt like, oh, this almost looks like, he got like the reels and just like did some digital effects to it, because this looks like an exact shot. It looks so cool. And as far as it being lost on kids, like, it's a conversation we had in The Shining where it's like, you knew so many of the pop culture references before you even saw it. So like, maybe they haven't seen The Shining, but they've seen the twin girls before, or like the blood coming out of the elevator, just all that kind of stuff. So I think it still hit. But one thing I think this movie did is it did kind of like reach out to a lot of the demographics. Cause I know for myself, like while I caught a lot of the stuff, when I forget who it is at the end, but turns in is like, I choose the form of Gundam. I was like, I have no clue what that is, but I assume it's a super cool guy who can like beat Mecha Godzilla, and so that stuff is lost on me. but I understood what the intent was behind it. So I think that's probably what it was throughout the movie. Like if you didn't get it, like at least you kind of understood where it was coming from, or maybe like the power that it had. But it's like, I have no idea what Gundam is, but good job, man. He kicked his ass.
Yeah,
like,
the Gundam people love that scene. The Gundam people did backflips in the theater. They were screaming in each other's faces during that scene.
But there were like scenes where people are
this?
marching in. It's like anime characters. I don't know anything about that.
Yeah.
And like whoever knows who that person is so stoked that they just saw them. Like that's way cool. I have no idea who that is though.
It was a good call by Spielberg to not use Leopardon. Are you guys familiar who Leopardon is?
You could say
From
any
Thundercats, right?
thing.
He's not from Thundercats. So Leopardon, the Japanese Spider-Man live action TV show.
Oh, it's a banger. Yeah,
he has
it's
like
a
this
banger.
wristwatch thing that calls like a mecha, just like Power Rangers, and that mecha's name is Leopardon. And so it's Spider-Man's mecha.
That.
Rad.
And so in the book,
Clutch.
it's not Iron Giant, it's Leopardon. So I mean,
okay.
it would have been cool to see Leopardon, but wise choice for the wider audience to go.
Yes. Yeah.
Iron Giant.
Big time.
I would have.
Big
That
time.
would have been completely
Yeah.
over my head. Matt, you said something earlier in your argument, which I do agree with to an extent, but I just wanted to counter it real quick because I know it's going to piss probably everyone off on this entire pod. And you can't see it, but I'm circling your face with my mouse, Ethan, right now, because I know I'm excited to see your reaction here. Because when you said it's the same thing as criticizing the going back to previous movies in Endgame,
It is.
while I certainly enjoyed the whole Cap versus Cap, I can do this all day, I know thing.
Mr. Rogers, I almost forgot that suit did nothing for your ass.
No one asked you to look, Tony.
It's ridiculous.
I think you look great, Cap. As far as I'm concerned, that's America's ass.
That was my least favorite part about Endgame was the time travel into the previous timelines. So your argument works, but also for me personally, I don't love it because I didn't like that in that specific movie, despite liking the scenes we got out of it. I didn't like it as a plot device, but I liked the scenes that we saw. So
So how are you getting excited for Loki?
That's a good question. No, that's a fair question. I actually really am excited for Loki, and maybe I'm a hypocrite, but I think for whatever reason, I don't know anything. Yeah, Owen Wilson helps.
There you go.
I also don't know too much about Loki, and for all I know, he's just seeing it's like a Scrooge and the Ghost of Christmas Past thing.
Yeah.
Like for all I know, he's seeing a projection.
For what it's worth,
of
we don't really
the
know
past.
what we're gonna get.
That's a good point, though. I am excited to see Loki, but I remember talking to you, Ben, about Endgame before it came out and the possibilities of how they were going to solve their situation. And I wish they would have gone a few of the other directions that you talked about versus the way that they went. I thought the time stamping armbands was cheap, but maybe it was the easiest thing for a wide audience to grasp. I don't know. But
Yeah,
I was
and
hoping
again,
that was
like we
going to
talked
make
about
Ethan
in
a lot
this-
more angry than it did.
You can't see, but I'm raging behind this face. I'm raging.
He has the Steve Buscemi kill list that he's like writing your name on the
Yeah,
wall.
He's like, oh no, Tyler, that's fine.
Yeah. I just think part of why Endgame works so well, and this one again, is like we just live in an Easter egg society where it's like, oh, cool, I can see that scene from a different angle now or whatever. So,
Like I
get
literally
it, you
just
know, it can
watched
come
Winter
across as like
Soldier
a
last
crutch.
night, and like so the
Endgame-
elevator scene is like,
Endgame
I
is
was
tough
stoked
because Endgame is tough because it had a very specific expectation of 10 years. Ready
Right.
Player One does not have that.
True.
Ready Player One is strictly a one-off movie, right? Endgame, we all knew that we had to pay homage to everything we've seen, to Pym Particles and Battle of New York and everything that has gotten us to that point had to be folded into the story somehow, because that's literally everything that we've experienced so far up until that
That's
moment. But yeah, Ready Player One it's interesting, and I'll say that with the three keys that's your goal, right? Is to get these three keys in the OASIS. One of them is a race, which is super cool, like all kinds of pop culture references, but it's just a race, right? It's not pop culture specific. The third key, like you've got to play adventure, and I get that is definitely like pop culture, part of society, but you've got to think like from a Spielberg standpoint, one of your main missions has to be solely based around one iconic pop culture reference. And I would assume that The Shining to him is that one standout pop culture reference where he said, I don't want to just I don't want them to like just see an elevator with blood coming out. I want them to live it. Like I want there to be more screen time because of this deserved area that we're in, or reference that we have. I mean, my daughter woke up from her nap while I was watching the Shining scene, and I've never seen The Shining, so I feel like H over here. I'm just like, is it scary? Like, I don't know. So she woke up from her nap, and I was like, I should probably shut this off because she's only 3, and so I turned it off, and I was like, we can watch one of your shows, and she goes, I'm not scared. You can turn it back on, and I was like, all right, you're either really playing a big bluff here and like just trying to impress me, or like you're actually not scared, and that's totally fine. We'll just watch The Shining in a couple years together. Like that's cool, no problem.
I will say, without context, maybe that scene's not terribly scary. I mean, other than there's like giant axes and that sort of thing, but in context with that movie, it's not even so much that it's scary, it's just like unsettling and creepy, in my opinion. But
I would love to see you in a virtual reality experience going through the Shining hotel.
Who, me?
Oh my god.
No, Ethan.
Oh yeah.
Have you not seen the movie?
You can't. You could drop like 10 grand in crisp 100s in front of me, and I was like, I think I'll pass. Like I'm good. I don't.
Not a scary movie guy.
That's no, I'm not a scary. No,
I'm not.
The short answer.
I'm not.
No.
Yeah, we're actually none of us are.
But I would recommend The Shining. It's fucking great. It's
I gotta
really,
watch it.
really, really fucking good. So we've talked a little bit about what it would be like to experience The Shining, and be able to do that, which leads me to the next thing I wanted to talk about, because we talked about how this is sort of a Willy Wonka story. It's a Holy Grail story. And it's hard for me to not compare this to The Matrix, in that you can make yourself be able to do anything you want. And so I'm curious, who in that sense did it better between The Matrix and Ready Player One, or if you have other examples of, being able to have unlimited power and ability based on a certain environment, who did it better? And if you could choose whether you could have the abilities of The Matrix, plug in and learn whatever you want, learn to do whatever you want, or access the Oasis, which would you choose and why? Ethan, you're first.
Oh man, so The Matrix did it better in terms of having a depth and a reason to why The Matrix exists. We know that there's a very determined purpose for that.
Right.
The Oasis is just for fun. So like, it's just to live somewhere else. Unless you want a good meal, then you got to come back to reality, as Halliday says. But like, I would definitely choose the Oasis. Like, I don't see myself in my free time wanting to become a spy and have these really high risks, like, high stakes, life or death situations every turn.
Yeah.
I think the Oasis is just like a lot more fun. Like, they go to a nightclub and like there's a planet that's a casino.
Yeah.
Like, sure, that sounds fantastic to me. And like, yeah, I'm sure you get sucked in like anything else. But if we had the Oasis right now, I think like you zero out and like, shit, like that sucks. I zeroed out. Like, back to the Oasis. Got to start from scratch. Like The Matrix, I would be like, oh my god, like I just died in real life. Like I can't. There's too much for me. So I think the Oasis is just way cooler. It's way more my speed. And I think it's where you'd find me every waking moment that I would not be with my family.
Okay, you get to choose. Obviously, if you had the Oasis for real, I'm going to add this to the question because as I'm realizing we're all going to choose the Oasis probably. So what is the first virtual world you would create for yourself in the Oasis?
Oh man, I got to create it myself.
Well, like you could hop into The Shining, you could hop into Endgame,
yeah.
You could hop into the NBA Finals, whatever you want to do. Like what's the first thing? What would you do?
Listen, Tyler, you call me out. I got to stay on brand. I would fucking put myself right inside New York City Put me in the Diamond District. Make me watch. Me watch Howard Ratner just lose his brain.
You wouldn't be Howard Ratner.
Putting a 5-spot parlay on the Celtics. Like that's it.
You'd be in the gem. You'd be in that mysterious gem, and you'd be like looking up at his
exactly.
crazy
I'd be
eyes.
living in the gem exactly. I'd be Howard Ratner's prized possession.
Would be like learning the exact like La La Land dances or something like that. Like you take the Gosling role. It's like you have to nail this like beat by beat, or else
Oh man,
I'm with him. I think we're all probably going to say the same thing. I think the Matrix made like a deeper world, which is kind of cool. It's funny you mentioned that thing about what he says about it's this place to get a good meal, because it reminded me of like from the Matrix when Cypher's like, the steak isn't real. Like the Matrix is telling me it's juicy and delicious, but this isn't real. But whatever, I'm like, oh, it's kind of cool. The similarities there. I think I'm kind of gonna alter your question, Tyler, and just like
do it.
If I had to make like. No, it's a great question, but I just like I'm thinking of it in the terms of the game where like you had to like make a mission for someone to accomplish. It is like I would do a time limit and make someone do everything that they do in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but like in 5 hours. Like you got to get Sloan out of school, you got to go to the game, you got to do the parade, you got to get back in this time, and just like because you can't do that in a day, you know what I mean? But like tell someone like if you can accomplish this in 5 hours, you get the key. Like that. If I was Halliday, that'd be my first thing for people. It's like. You do Ferris Bueller's Day Off. If you do it, you get the key. That kind of a thing.
That's great.
Genius.
Yeah. I would. So going on with Ben's, I think my thing would be you have to take Michael Jordan's spot on the Toon Squad and beat the Monstars in Space Jam.
Ooh, nice.
I like that.
It's a very difficult task. And then to go along with Ethan's Uncut Gems drop, what would a crossover look like with the MCU where that rock is an Infinity Gem? You know what I'm saying?
Oh,
dude.
shit.
Oh man, you just collided my worlds. Cool. I feel like George Costanza over here. The worlds are colliding.
Infinity Gems.
I don't know what to do. I don't like this.
Ethan's gonna pass out.
That'd be crazy, man. Like realistically, man, I'd love to like live on Titan like 60 years ago, like before Thanos was born or anything, because Titan was beautiful. Like a beautiful planet. So it's like that sounds pretty legit to me. Like that'd be cool.
Yeah,
that'd be dope.
Yeah, I'm on board with you guys. The Matrix quote did it better, but obviously it'd be more fun to be in the Oasis. Although, like they're not as really that different, other than you can die in the Matrix as opposed to you can't die in the Oasis. Mm-hmm. And also
they're pretty big thing.
Yeah,
minor detail.
Pretty big difference.
Like you could actually die, but other than that.
But as far as like being able to upload anything you want to be able to do or create any world, it's essentially the same thing.
I know Kung Fu.
Show me.
And also like in both worlds, you get to actually feel what's happening. Like, like that scene where she's asking him if she can feel everything. I was like, this is surprisingly erotic for a I was like, I was feeling some things there.
They used
like
the lights in a very creative way.
Yeah, Artemis was getting to me there. So, it's the Matrix, like Ethan said, there was some actual depth to it, and there's actual stakes because you can die, and the freedom of the human race depends on it. But also, I would prefer the real world in Ready Player One to whatever real world we get in the Matrix.
Oh yeah.
Even including Zion. I don't want to live there either.
Completely shaved and reborn.
The first thing I could think of if I could create my own little world in the Oasis was similar to Matt. I would put myself on the Utah Jazz. I'd be the point guard, and we'd win. We'd try to win the title.
Yeah.
Knowing my luck, we still wouldn't be able to do it in virtual reality either.
You got to hit that Stockton shot in Houston.
Yeah, that's how I get my key.
You
I finally win the NBA Finals.
He's been doing this for 50 years.
Also, I just want to riff really quick on Matt's answer here because I think it's super funny. But I think the hardest mission in the Oasis would be getting the band Oasis back together. Like if that was like the final mission, it's like getting Noel and Liam to get back together. It's like
Oasis was a better band
Oasis till you get Oasis together.
Yeah. My first thought when you asked Matrix or Oasis, I'm like, Oasis was a better band.
Is there a band called The Matrix? I'm sure there is.
There must be.
Well, they're shit because we don't know who they are. Well, fellas, I don't know what else we could talk about. I mean, obviously, the four of us could probably go on and on and on. We'll save our listeners and our viewers from that fate. Ethan, again, I want to thank you for joining us. If there's anything else you guys want to talk about, now is your chance. But I think we might as well wrap this thing up and put Ready Player One.
The one quick thing I want to say is this was a great one use of the word fuck in a PG-13 movie.
Correct.
Because you can only use it once and it can't be in a sexual term. So when they throw Chucky, it's like,
It's fucking Chucky.
that's a great use for this. Like, and I don't know why I always think of Spielberg is like a prude, you know, like he wouldn't want swearing or anything like that. But like we just talked about, there's like a lot of kind of sexual innuendo. Then like the language, I'm like, oh yeah, maybe he's, I don't know. I just assume he's like, is always making family movies. So I loved seeing that. And I think there's some great uses like in Days of Future Past, right? When they go get Logan out of the bar or something and he tells him to fuck off. Like there's some good ones, but I thought this was great. I loved it.
Well,
my very last 2 cents to put in is Mark Rylance is Loki steals this movie. Fantastic.
He does so good.
Fantastic.
He does so good.
As Halliday.
Mm-hmm.
He's so good.
Yeah.
He's very good as William Kunstler in Trial of Chicago 7 as well. But like he's low-key like the best actor in this movie. Like obviously no shade to Ben Mendelsohn, 15 minutes of Mendelsohn upcoming, but like great acting, great chops, crushes this movie.
15 minutes of Ben,
So good.
parentheses, Mendelsohn.
Mendelsohn.
I just a quick shout out to Ralph Ineson, who's Wade Watts's, I guess, uncle-in-law or
something weird like that.
Anne's boyfriend. Man, he's in the movie for like 5 minutes, but absolutely slays his role.
Right.
So funny.
So good.
And he's going to be the Green Knight, right? In the upcoming Green Knight movie.
Yeah,
I don't know if you guys are excited about that. I think he is.
He's also
the
going to
Green
be in
Knight.
the Tragedy of Macbeth, which is super exciting too. Crazy.
That's cool.
He's in a lot of cool stuff, actually. But I loved him in this.
Yeah.
Really good.
That's it. I'm cutting you guys off. We're done.
That's it. We're done.
For everyone out there listening and watching, first of all, thank you again. We really appreciate it. We could do this without you. We've done it before, but we'd prefer not to. We really appreciate y'all's support. Go and check out 15 Minutes of Marvel, hosted by our boy Ethan Simmie.
Yeah.
And if you haven't already, tell your friends, tell your family about both podcasts. We'll share the love. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and check out our Patreon shop. We've got some options so you can get your skin in the game and support us at a somewhat higher level. But regardless, we're happy you're here and we appreciate it, and we'll catch you next time.
See ya.
See ya.
Thank you. See ya.
But what we found out is that each one of us is a brain and an athlete
And a basket case. A princess.
and a criminal. Does that answer your question? Sincerely yours, The Breakfast Club.
Don't